Hello everyone and welcome back to Potty Planet Entertainment. My name is Chris, and in case you don't know, I review movies and I rank them on a scale of 0 to 100 in increments of 5. Today we're continuing our series reviewing the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy with Spider-Man 2. This is actually my second time recording this. I recorded the video, I made my thumbnail, got it all ready to upload, and I looked at it and I noticed I had left some stuff out by accident. So I'm going to record it again. So, let's talk about Spider-Man 2. Came out in 2004, and it stars Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Alfred Molina, Rosemary Harris, and J.K. Simmons. It was directed by Sam Raimi, and it was produced by Joseph M. Caracciolo, Kevin Feige, and Stan Lee. And in this movie, Peter is really grappling with living the two lives of being a college student and being Spider-Man. And it's really weighing on his personal life. It's damaging his relationships. He can't show up to class on time. And all the while, a scientist named Dr. Otto Octavius creates a machine where he can harness the power of the sun. And he helps control it with these four mechanical arms that he's made. But when the experiment goes wrong, it fries this chip on it that keeps the arms from controlling him. And they end up controlling him and turning him into a supervillain. And they make him steal money to try and rebuild this machine, and Peter is getting super stressed out, and he loses his powers, and he gives up on being Spider-Man, but at the same time, Dr. Octopus is out there, so he does have to pick it back up. Spider-Man 2. I've always liked this movie, but I've never loved it. If you remember a long time ago, I did a video called Top 10 Movies Everyone Likes That I Don't, and this movie was on there. Even when I was a kid, I liked this movie, but I never loved it. Because I always viewed it as more of a drama than a superhero movie. I always had the opinion that this movie feels like they wanted to make a movie about Peter Parker, but they knew nobody would go to see it, so they just sort of shoehorned Spider-Man into the plot, and it never really worked for me. I rewatched this movie recently, and I realized I was wrong. This is a fantastic movie. I don't like it as much as I like the first one, and I'll talk about that, but I realize why. I never understood why everyone always said this was so good. I always thought this movie was very overrated, but I don't feel that way anymore, although I do disagree with people when they say this is better than the first one. I don't agree this is better than the first one. I think the first one is a better movie, but I do love Spider-Man 2 now. So let's go ahead and talk about Spider-Man 2. So for one thing, it's got some good humor in it. I love the scene, and I don't know if this was done on purpose, but after Peter has given up being Spider-Man, and he buys a hot dog, and he takes like the most gigantic bite out of a hot dog. Also, the action in this movie is really, really good. There's fantastic in-camera action sequences here, and of course the train scene is the one that everyone always talks about. It's often regarded as one of the greatest action scenes of all time. It isn't just Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man fighting on this monorail. There's like sequences to this fight. Like they go in the train, they go out of the train, Peter comes off the train, he's got to get back on the train, he's got to catch people that Dr. Octopus is throwing off the train. Like there's like different levels to it almost. It kind of plays out like a video game, and it works really, really well in the movie. Peter losing his powers really just adds an additional challenge to him, because in this movie pounds him into the dirt. I mean, this movie's merciless on Peter, and you feel so bad for him. And him losing his powers just makes that even worse. It's a very character-focused film. This movie is very characters first. It's also very well casted. All the same cast from the first movie comes back for this one. Only now we got Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, and he is perfectly cast. I don't like him as a villain quite as much as I like Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin, but he is perfectly casted as Dr. Octopus, and I love him and Willem Dafoe coming back for Spider-Man No Way Home. It's just, seeing those two come back was just awesome. I also love how this movie shows how difficult it would actually be to be Spider-Man. It would not be a walk in the park, and this movie shows you from a realistic standpoint what it would actually be like to be a person who's trying to deal with family life and college and a job, to also at the same time be a superhero and not have anyone know that you're that superhero. Like, I appreciate that this shows you more of a realistic approach to that. Because that being a superhero wouldn't be all cool. It would be really, really hard. Especially if nobody's allowed to know that you're that superhero. This movie also has some really good practical effects in it. The mechanical arms, Dr. Octopus's arms, they are real. They are not CGI. They actually did that, and it looks all the more better because it's real and not CGI. This movie is very emotionally powerful. This is a very emotionally heavy film, and you don't really often get quite as much of that from superhero movies. And you could just breathe the biggest sigh of relief when MJ finally finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. You just go, oh, finally, because the whole movie you just know that most of his problems would be solved if he just told her that he's Spider-Man, but he can't, and so and he never tells anyone. People just find out. This movie is a nice change of pace from this, you know, it is. You don't really get superhero movies a lot like this nowadays. You get more like the Avengers movies, and so this is nice how different it is. Now, this is not a perfect movie. I'll admit, I didn't even think the first one was perfect. So let's go ahead and get into my cons. For one thing, the pacing of this movie isn't as good as the first. This movie's only a few minutes longer than that one, but it feels way longer than that. At times, it's kind of easy to forget you're watching a superhero movie because it feels more like a romantic drama at times, which is why I was never a big fan of this movie. And when you're watching a superhero movie, it's not good when you forget that you're watching a superhero movie. I've never heard anyone talk about this, but so Mary Jane gets engaged to an astronaut in this movie, right? And she kisses him in this one scene, and then he's like, whoa, I feel like I'm back on the moon. Dude, when did you go to the moon? We haven't been to the moon since the early 70s. When did you go to the moon, bro? Also, this movie has the same problem as the first one, where the blue screen does make the blue part of the Spider-Man suit look black. I also don't really understand why the people on the monorail don't expose Spider-Man for, like, who he is, because his mask comes off, and they see who he is. Now, I understand this movie was shot in 2003 where, like, you know, cell phones, we didn't have iPhones yet. We did have, like, flip phones, but they weren't as common. And so I buy that not as many people would have just been able to take out their phones and record it and stuff, but I find it hard to believe that not one single person on that train took a digital camera and was like, oh, I'm going to make a bunch of money off of this picture. Like, not one person. Like, this isn't as bad as, like, at the end of the Hannah Montana movie, when she takes off her wig, and then people are like, we'll keep your secret, Hannah. Yeah! This isn't near like that, but I find it hard to believe, even though I do believe that people would want to help keep his identity a secret to protect him, I do find it hard to believe that there wasn't one person on that train that was just like, I gotta get this. So in the scene with the bank where Dr. Octopus robs the bank, and Peter and Aunt May are there, and he runs away so he could put on his costume, and Aunt May thinks he abandoned her. I never understood why she doesn't bring that back up with him. Like, why did you just leave me there? She never discusses it with him. And then I wish this movie had a moment where Peter realizes he can't handle being Spider-Man alone. There isn't one moment where he's just, because nobody knows he's Spider-Man. He tells absolutely no one. It's just him. And this movie should have had a moment where he was just like, I simply cannot handle this by myself. And he never has a moment like that, even though he really should have. I'm sure he learns that lesson, but they never show him really learning that lesson. So it would have been nice if this movie did have that moment. And I also want to say one more thing in this movie's defense. I've heard complaints that people say that, like, the building of fire scene was, like, very tacked on. I don't think it feels tacked on at all. I like that sequence because that was a scene where he learned that if he hadn't stressed out so much and he had kept being Spider-Man, he could have saved the other person that was in the building. The firefighter comes out and he's like, there was a poor soul trapped on whatever floor. They didn't make it out. And he sits there and he's like, crap, I could have saved them. And that was the moment where he realizes he needs to be Spider-Man. And so I think that scene was incredibly necessary, and I don't agree with that complaint at all. Now, like I said, do I like this movie as much as the first one? No. But I do love Spider-Man 2. I realize I've always been wrong about this movie, and I'm going to give it, even though I don't like it as much as the first one, I'm going to give it the same rating, and I'm going to give Spider-Man 2 a 90. All right, we will be finishing up soon with Spider-Man 3. Not a great movie, so it will be fun to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Potty Player Entertainment for more. Hit the like button. Leave me a review, suggestions down in the comments down below. Follow me on Instagram at Potty Player Entertainment for channel updates. And much love. Trying to web the recording button to make it turn off. Okay, I'll stop.